are.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sheep Guys podcast. I'm your host, Zach, and this is my friend and an interview person,
Corey Myers.
Corey. It's great.
Glad to be here.
Great to have you here. So those of you guys who follow us here on the channel know that we are on step 3. We follow the 12 steps, and each month represents one of the steps. So this step is came to believe. Oh, I'm sorry. Made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as we understood him, but we know him to be Jesus. And so the Sheep Guys are unabashed in our faith that we follow Jesus, who is the great shepherd. Amen. And so, there are those of us who have been following the shepherd for a while, and we've strayed away, though we would say we're still a sheep, as a part of that flock. And we've come back full circle, but you and I were talking a little bit at the beginning about the difference between having a relationship with the king or just operating by kingdom principles.
Yeah. And for me, finding Celebrate Recovery has been absolutely life-changing, even after, I've been following Jesus almost my entire life in some way or another, but 15 years in ministry, vocational ministry, full-time ministry, and then not even really feeling like, hey, I've walked through step 3 until the last year and a half or so.
Yeah, that's good. So we talked, Monty and I talked originally, I think it was the first, we do 4 episodes, so there's 4 weeks in a month, and we did the first episode talking about the step 3 kind of being a salvation step, being this in the sense that, like, if you didn't know Christ and you didn't have a relationship with God to some degree, then you would recognize, step 1, that your life is unmanageable, and then 2, came to believe that a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity. And then there's step 3, and step 3 is making the decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. So I've been a Christian since I was 18. I think I did a couple altar calls before that, but I think it became real for me when I turned 18. Yeah. However, there was a season of life where I backslid. That would be the Christian term for relapse, I guess. And so I want to talk about, because I know you, and we've been a party to similar groups and stuff, but I'm going to let you expand a little bit on what it's like to be a Christian or to walk or know how to walk with God, but then still struggle with addiction. Mm. And if you share what your addiction is, I mean, what was your primary thing that kept you bound?
I was bound by alcohol. Porn was a big part of my struggle, and as I walked through and just hiding that, all those years and trying to go back and forth and vacillate between, hey, helping people walk through these similar struggles and knowing all the right answers and just not having, as you mentioned a moment ago when we were talking, like a relationship with the king, and just sort of hiding that part of my journey. But alcohol really became my primary struggle in the last several years of my ministry, kind of that broke me.
It's interesting. They did some, I think it was Pew Research did some studies, and I'm going to probably get this wrong, but it's a high percentage of people who are in ministry. There's a loneliness aspect to people who are in ministry because you're supposed to have all the answers. And so getting vulnerable and being a part of instead of a part from or a part of becomes difficult for people. And so it's easy to fall into addictive patterns. You could hurt your back, and now you're popping pills all the time. Your back don't really hurt much, but you're still hitting that Vicodin hard. Or, lust is a factor. Like you said, porn really is an outcropping of the issue of lust, technically. All addiction is a sense of fulfilling a God-sized hole with something like other than God. Yeah. So what was it like for you? Like, what brought you to the place where you knew that it's time that I surrender? Again, step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him.
Yeah, it's really interesting. As I look through this job, I've gone through this point where I felt like I've arrived, so many times, like, oh, I found the thing that make me better and whole. And I've even done that in this recovery journey, which started in January of 24 for me, as far as Celebrate Recovery goes, plugging in here. But it was my last work in Houston, it was around 2018, 2019, where I sort of hit this wall and just had really struggled and decided, you can blame a lot of things in addiction, and but I ran out of things to blame. I was jumping from job to job. Relationship with my wife struggled. My oldest son, he had become a teenager, that started to struggle.
Yeah.
Started to see, hey, I can't really. I was at a youth ministry is where I was serving and working, and it just kind of crumbled. And I thought, at that time I was still blaming the church. I was blaming the elders, the leadership. It was their fault. It was parents. It was all these things that were the problem. And so we decided that, hey, we'll sort of transfer, and I'll buy my dad's business.
Yeah.
And that will fund my ministry, because the church was the problem. Is this if I'm not relying on a paycheck and all these things. And so I feel there's a lot of other things, and we don't have enough time to dive into everything.
Were you in that regard? So it's easy where like we blame other people. This is part of the problem. It's like, hey, I do this because it's a weird deal that we've convinced ourselves that we can actively participate in some kind of toxic behavior because the actors in our life haven't been positioned well. Yeah. And if they would behave, if they would do what they're supposed to, then I wouldn't be struggling in this way. Absolutely. Or I wouldn't need the reprieve of my drug of choice, or I wouldn't need, whatever. With some men who struggle with pornography, it's like, well, my wife stopped sleeping with me. She says she's no longer interested. I'm not saying it's your story. I'm just saying there are these things. Well, what am I supposed to do? Right. And then the acting out happens. Yeah. Right. And so the interesting thing about like that is that the Bible kind of tells us, what to do. Imagine that same
and I can be
Bible.
So blind to it so often, but that's really where. So I was in youth ministry for a long time, and then when we moved here to the Blanco area, I was in the pulpit and I was preaching, and so week after week, I'm telling people what they need to be doing to get their lives right with God, and I'm just shining a mirror on my soul the whole time, and so that guilt
made you want to drink.
Absolutely, the drinking got crazy in this. I just kind of got to there's nobody else to blame. Yeah. And hit the bottom. And this step, making a decision to turn our lives and wills over to God, for me, my relationship with God was no longer a decision. It was just I was just going through the motions. There was no conscious decision to let God rule and reign in my life, and like that I'm following him. And I don't want to backtrack too much, but for me, a big part of it was that I didn't know that God was a good father. The only the parable of the talents. The only individual that gets told to go away. He says, "I knew you to be a hard man," and that was my picture of God. Yeah, that he was a hard man. Unless I did everything perfect, if I knew it, a lot of my upbringing, my theology was that I had to know precisely, and then my analytical brain, I had to know and have all the pieces put together for me to be right with God. I had to have all the questions answered, and so it was a knowledge-based thing. If I knew correctly, then I would save myself, kind of thing. And so for me, the questions in ministry, there's so many gray areas that we don't like to have faith. We really struggle with trusting God. Yeah, and that's where I was. I just got to this place where I didn't have the answers anymore. My life was spiraling, and I thought God was a hard man who was just out to get me.
Well, I grew up believing God was like a divine taskmaster. There was no way to actually please God. And he had a lot of rules and traditions and things that I was supposed to be doing, which I consistently failed on. But I still knew he was real, and I still knew that the Bible and my faith was important enough that I'm not going to walk away from that. But that's why I said at the beginning when we were talking, it's living by the principles of the kingdom, but not really knowing the king, right? And you said something a second ago, and I want to just the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? Go back to the garden. God just wanted us to trust him and have a relationship with him. That's really what it was. And so part of this whole thing with Christianity is that Jesus restores what was lost in the garden, which was relationship. Because what we did was this. He said, that tree will bring death. And so we said, well, it looks good to eat. It looks good for knowledge. Half of those things were true. And then we partook. And the tree actually gave us the information that we wanted. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So now we have this knowledge, head knowledge of good and evil. But the relationship piece is broken. So here what we do as Christians is we're like, we've got to have the head knowledge of what's right and what's wrong. That is feasting on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and not the tree of life, of which we know theologically speaking, Jesus is the tree of life. He is the life giver. He is the bread of life. He is the spring that never stops flowing. He is the water that you will never thirst again, right?
Yeah.
And
And
so-
having that idea that, hey, can you trust, like if you're going to give, right, make this decision to turn our lives and will over to the care of God, like knowing those things is essential, that he is good. He's for me. When I trust him, he won't let me down. Like
Yeah.
he is the life force. And so I think developing those, that helps, that those are some of the things which I found in Celebrate Recovery,
Right.
that I didn't find for whatever reason outside.
Well, because religion is, okay, a lot of people get this scripture wrong. We're both theologians, so we're getting, now we're talking all this Bible stuff, but a lot of people get this wrong. They say that Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? That passage specifically, Jesus was speaking to religious people getting in over the fence and not going through the gate, which he says, I am the gate and I am the great shepherd. Sheep, guys, follow this. Okay. I am the great shepherd. Anybody who comes in other than through the gate by any other way is a thief and a liar. And the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Religious people, religion is the thing that is stealing, killing, and destroying, right?
Yeah.
And people get that like, oh, Satan. Yes, well, yeah. I mean, Satan is the author of all of the lies. He's the, but
Well, you don't want to see yourself in that role, and
then we're pushing it.
and that those are some of the truths that you face that just that kind of break you.
Yeah.
Standing up in front of people and telling them, being very religious, and I'm hearing those words, and Jesus is identifying me as one of those people that is leading, and that's a hard truth to.
We're a
say.
Pharisee.
'Cause
Yeah, or we become.
If you admit that, there's a lot of consequences.
Sure.
And so but that's the only way, right?
Yeah.
The truth will make you free, and not in the ministry context, especially. Who can you tell that to? I'm reminded of Psalm 73 and Asaph's leader, and he's saying, well, if I would have been true to that, if I'd have said that, I would have let down the congregation. I would have let down how do I do this? And so that's where I was. And so finding, and AA was a huge part of my journey as well.
Yeah.
But finding Celebrate Recovery and you guys that, hey, this is a place where I could just be honest.
Yeah.
And find that, wow, God can still love me.
Yeah.
That he is with me in this struggle. He's not against, because I always thought I had to get my life together. Then I could confess. And that's how I always did it.
Well, we would tell people religiously, you don't have to do that. You come as you are, right? So we know the answers, but then like in our internal battle, we're like, we got to clean this stuff up, right?
Once
This
it's
isn't
right, then I could tell somebody about my porn problem, because that was,
in the past.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not my
used
struggle
to
anymore.
struggle. Right.
Drinking,
Yeah.
it's like, it's not out of control anymore. It's like, so once I had it handled, and when you're on, like, that's not true. And so finding a place where, hey, this week, man, I really screwed up. And if you have that ability, and it's just amazing how coming to know and trust the grace of God, that's something I really missed and found in turning my life over to him.
Yeah. Well, this has been good. I mean, I could go on for a long time. Been a Christian since I was 18, fell away for a long time, believed that I could pursue. I always use the analogy, I like put God in a backpack with all the stuff that I wanted from God.
Yeah.
And I was going on my journey. And when I needed stuff, I would take the backpack off and unzip it. And all right, God, you can provide the following things because now I need you. But guess what? I'm going to zip that sucker, put it back on my back. I'm going to do my thing. And what I realized was like, just like in the Garden of Eden, just like in my personal life, God knows what's going to fulfill me and make me the most happy. And that is to first off, pursue him. You talk about this sense that we get that God was a shrewd man or a mean man, right? And then Jesus gives us all these examples of what his father is like. And one of them, is the prodigal son. And we know he went, did the porn, the wild living, the orgies, the drinking, squandered all of his money that his dad gave him when he wasn't supposed to give it to him. But his dad was like, you asked for it. And this is, I love you. And and then he comes back and his dad pulls up his robe like a distinguished man would not have done in those times. And he runs to his son and then puts the signet ring on his finger, which represented you are back in not only my good graces, but you can transact business-related things on behalf of the family. Yeah. And embraced him and all of the things. And so it's like, I think this particular episode, if it could be beneficial to anybody, it would be towards two people, right? It would first be to the struggling minister or person in ministry.
That's a bit, yeah. So many. And since walking through this journey, it's just minister after minister, knowing, and not that I'm this person people are coming to all the time, but I'm just becoming more and more aware that, wow, people in this calling are not being true to what God wants them to be, because we're really hurting.
Well, the world says, well, that's so they're all hypocrites, right? And so this is why I'm addressing two people. One would be the person who's struggling, the pastor or minister or somebody that is serving God, and they're struggling in these areas. Like, unless you get open and vulnerable and you tell on yourself and you're transparent, you're not going to get healed. You're not going to get your crap together. Right. And then be able to say, look what I used to do in the past. Like, people struggle in the present, and it needs to be okay that, like you, and I watched this journey that you went through, like you did. And it was amazing how you stated how graceful people were. And the other person I want to address is the one who says, look at them, they're all hypocrites. We're just people. And we love God, but we sometimes get caught up in the kingdom and we don't get in relationship with the King. And so... and
we are, I mean, that's the hard fact that I had to face, is that I was a hypocrite.
Yeah.
I was blatantly a hypocrite, and I didn't want to be, and I just found myself over and over being that and just admitting that. But the person who's pointing that finger to, if they're honest, right, there's it's impossible.
They're being a hypocrite by saying, look at you.
And we find ourselves. And so now I'm more open to the person that, is feeling. I can understand those feelings.
Yeah.
I completely understand. But there is hope, and there's a way out of that. And God is a good father, wanting to walk with you through that struggle and pain.
Yeah.
And you can trust him with your life.
You can. Well, we've learned, I sometimes revert back mentally, right? I've been sober 18 years almost, right? And the porn stuff and lust, I mean, God's really been able to, I've been successful in a lot of areas for a really long time, by the grace of God, right? That doesn't mean I'm not susceptible. It doesn't mean that I'm better than the next guy. It just means that, like, I've strung a few days together. And I'm hoping that this podcast, YouTube channel, could have benefit to people who are trying to walk through sobriety, start for the first time to get sober, or to learn new things. And so what I'm looking for is for you guys to subscribe and pass this on to people who might benefit. hit that like, that thumbs up, and subscribe. Do you got anything else?
Absolutely. I would just say for those people you're talking to right now, just Zach and Monty, and just finding, man, I've appreciated so much your honesty and the way that you've walked through with me. And I know the times that we've had the step study, and the times just to share, it's like, hey, it's real. And there's times where, hey, I'm in this struggle, but then speaking from all those years of walking with God through this journey, I've just really benefited. And so I'm really hopeful for this podcast and for the people you'll touch. But I appreciate you, man. And
Thanks,
I know God's
man.
grace is
Appreciate
pouring
that
out in your life. So thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you next week. It will be step 4. Peace.